Welcome, Arvada Center. We are thrilled to have you here. I understand you have a consultant who has helped put together the report. And so I'd love to turn it over to you to go ahead and make quick introductions and take it away.
Do you want? Okay. Thank you.
Got a couple more weeks to do this.
So thanks very much to the city. We have been able to enjoy the services of a wonderful consultant firm, and it has been so great for us. We've been learning a lot. It's been validating of some of what we're doing. It's given us some new ideas, all of which it should do. So I want to start by thanking the city for supporting this, because it's really been a godsend. Thank you. So with that said, we have one here virtually and one here in person. The firm that was chosen with the city's assistance was Turner Townsend Heery. And this is Jenna Bueller, who's going to be making the presentation, and Vicky Infinito, who's here and can chime in as well. And she's joining us from Oregon.
Oh,
So Jenna, the floor is yours.
fantastic. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. And just to echo what Philip is saying, it's been such a joy to get to really dig into the organization, the details, and see really what has happened over the past 10 plus years at the Arvada Center during this big transition. So today, you all received the study and the recommendations. What we really want to focus on is a little bit of the background and methodology, but then really dig into the recommendations that are a part of how there's a plan now that potentially can move forward within that. If there's anything that you want us to stop and reflect on, please definitely let us know. But otherwise, we're going to try to be really good on that time management piece and go through the opportunities, a little bit of momentum, what's near-term opportunity, and then what is something that may take a little bit more time and resource and a recommendation and plan. So as Philip said, we work for a global company called Turner and Townsend Heery. Heery is the organization that we work with, who has been doing public sector work for over 70 years. We've got offices in Denver as well as across the country and the globe, and really happy to be able to do this work here. And this is just a little bit about who we are. It's about coming and digging in and understanding the client, the situation, and the community that they're serving. And there's always a challenge that's a part of this. We also come from performing arts backgrounds, so this was really a fantastic opportunity for us. I lead the national sector for cultural projects. So my team focuses on what does it mean to either own, operate, or fund any level of arts and culture facilities across the country. I was joined by my colleague, Vicky, who is the senior project manager, and she really led these efforts. Vicky also comes from performing arts background. She's been running facilities in Oregon and Seattle. I most recently, before doing this work, was running facilities up in Beaver Creek as well as in Aspen with the city of Aspen. And many of you probably know Chris Weinman's face from Simple Brown Design. He was here really helping to advise us on some of the facility items really related to code and infrastructure, so that these recommendations are rooted in what is potentially possible with the space, with a caveat there that he did not do any level of structural review, but it was more of he knows the facility well and was able to answer some of those questions for us along the way. So this was your key team, and we worked pretty closely with the organization and their leadership over time. So we focused on 4 areas. So we didn't do a huge deep dive into absolutely everything. We really touched on what's the overall 30,000 foot view, and then where can we pull down to have some of the most impact as it comes through that. So really this was focused on organizational structure and staffing, programming and education. And when we say programming here, we're really talking about a lot of the performing arts programming, whether that's the artistic programming or the presenting series that's happening. Development and fundraising, knowing that while the organization and the facility is 50 years in the community, fundraising as a nonprofit organization has only been happening for 10 years. So focusing in a lot on development and fundraising and answering some of those questions, and then taking a fresh look at how the facility is being used. This is something that's really important for everyone who has a facility. You probably even see it here in City Hall, where you'll have a space that had been used for one purpose and its intended purposes when it was built. And then all of a sudden something changes and you're able to make adjustments. Sometimes having fresh eyes coming in saying, why are you using that for that space? Could you do this? Was also a part of our process. So reflecting back, this work started in January. We were on site and we were remote with staff. We had a lot of conversations. We did a lot of touring. We saw hundreds of kids through the facility. We also looked at a multi-year financial review. So dug in with Andy and Clark on the financials that you all know well. And then we started to say, let's make sure we can find peers to benchmark against so that we can come to say, this isn't just what the Arvada Center is doing. This is what is happening nationally. And what are those trends? What are those benchmarks? How are we making sure that this is either above or below what the national benchmarks are? And then as I touched on, we worked with Simple Brown Design on some of the facility utilization pieces. So this was all really focused on guiding questions. We can start answering and asking a lot of different things, but we wanted to stay focused. So the first one here is really about how can the Arvada Center strengthen its development strategies? And this is really about fundraising, right? What can happen with the baseline and the foundation that's been set and what can be done to strengthen those programs? And then what organizational structure and staffing best supports moving forward? What does this mean with new leadership coming in? Where are the efficiencies? What's happening with employee retention, and how does that tie into the mission and how the mission is being delivered in the city-owned facility. Then looking at maximizing revenue potential. So we don't like to talk about revenue and mission back to back sometimes, but they're really so interconnected. As we start to think about what's the revenue generation per square foot across the Arvada Center, where is there opportunity? Where is maybe there a different focus? We really started to looking at what could be maximized. And then the other piece of this is what was happening with the programming in theater and education and what might be needed to either balance that out to offer more potential. I think the initial questions came in to be like, how would we grade what's going on right now? How does that come in? And again, how does that tie into mission, audience development, as well as that there? So that's where we started, and that's a piece of what we tried to answer as we came through this. The exciting thing that we love is that you all have something very special here, and I hope you all know that. It is hard for us to benchmark to say there's this happening in 17 other cities across the country, and here's how everyone is doing. And that's not a bad thing. This is really, as we're looking at it, the center was designed with a lot of space and potential and was looking to say, what are the gaps in the community, right? 50 years ago, you could pull that chip bag, it's all good. 50 years ago, what was the need? How was that grown into that? And so having the diversity of all these programs under one roof, your community can come for a little bit of a one-stop shop. That's great for parents, that's great for educators, that's great for audiences, because you're not having to pop all over the community to say, oh, I can't get that there, you have to go there. That for us is a big positive. You're serving a lot of different groups as well. So 12,000 annual participants are coming to the classes and camps alone. This is a huge sustainability factor, and this is a big piece of the financial element as well as the mission and goal delivery. You are reaching almost 70,000 school children through these community groups that are happening. So the bus-in programs, all of these pieces, that's in addition to that 12,000 up above. All of this is being done with a pretty lean staffing model. Many times we'll come into situations like this and say, okay, well, you could trim some fat here, and why do you have so many staff over there? We had so many discussions with staff that were saying, we're able to achieve this because we're being efficient in these ways. If we could grow, this is the resourcing that we would need, but we didn't find a lot of fat as it came down to it. But we also didn't find a model that was too lean. Sometimes when it's too lean, you're just not able to deliver. You're having a lot of problems. So there's a nice balance in there without being too big. And then really the city funding is an important piece of what's happening here as well. And this is a side of what allows for community access, for affordability, and this quality programming to be happening in a unique setting. So we were really excited to be able to say, let's focus on all of these pieces. But as we were doing that, we said, okay, let's find national benchmarks that are doing certain pieces of this. And then we did find, as you'll see in the report, some benchmarks that came really close, but not in the fullest sense of there's 17 of you across the country. So the biggest piece of this is the staff are really the center's greatest asset. As we started to look at that, whether that is background, knowledge and understanding, there's a very great retention rate on sort of the middle management and up piece. That deep institutional knowledge, but then there's a little bit of retention onboarding at the middle level and down. So you've got people who have stayed, who have grown, but what's happening with the succession, what's happening bringing new people in, there's a little bit of a gap there. That's a bit of a priority for us in the recommendations. Education, almost at near capacity. You have huge demand for what's going on, and that's really positive, but that demand is exceeding the available space. And you'll see how some of this connects into the recommendations as we move forward. And the growth is tied to the facility expansion. You have to have room for these programs. This isn't something that you could have these programs happening elsewhere. They have to have the critical specific specialty spaces within that. On the performing arts side, the main stage is driving your ticket revenue, and this is exactly where we would want to see this for a producing venue, as well as everything that's happening in fiscal year 26 is demonstrating strong ticket sales and strong market demand. Performing arts and selling arts and entertainment is sometimes like spinning around, putting on a blindfold, trying to make sure it's on, and then throwing a dartboard. You can do everything you can to prep and prepare, but every now and then you're going to have a miss. And some of that is related to title, some of that is related to economy, politics, local pressures. You never know. And when you're programming 12 to 18 months out, you don't know what's happening today. So the ebbs and flows that we were able to see within the past look back in the performing arts ticket sales were on track and on trend to where we were seeing. Sometimes you have good years, sometimes you have not so great years. It always balances out in between. You just have to keep pushing and driving. And everything that we're seeing for fiscal year 26 shows strong market demand. It's not that you're programming and missing the market. The market is just reacting to you and everything else around it. And that's going to tie into that title fluctuation as well. On the development side, your city funding and your SCFD funding are absolutely critical. We see that in a lot of city-owned and nonprofit operated spaces where having that net investment is important, and we see it all over Colorado. And that becomes really important. What that's then allowing is this broad and loyal donor base to start to grow up and mature a bit within what's happening within that 10-year organization. And that your diverse mix of funding has the growth potential. And as we get into this with some of the recommendations, you have to kind of figure out who wants to give, why are they going to give, how are we talking about that relationship with the donors in a different way than we're talking to them about buying tickets or buying and registering for a class. You have to grow their understanding of why they should give. We sort of sometimes call it the art of giving. You can talk to people until you're blue in the face. You can tell them about all the good programs you're doing. You can't tell them how to spend their money, right? And so that takes time to develop. And what we're seeing here in the development dollars is that there's enough diversity in the programs that now the priority with leadership coming in and a focus on development can happen to say, well, let's put focus here. Let's see how this can elevate and let's move that along. So real quickly, as I'm moving along, the fiscal year 26 highlights Frozen and Come From Away, absolutely phenomenal sales. Frozen, absolutely expected, great to have over the holidays. Come From Away, the Arvada Center had some of the best ticket sales on this. We reflected back with the board. The national tour went it out, struggled a bit. This community related very well to this, and that was fantastic as it came to that. You've got the 50th anniversary of the center. You have folks who are giving in honor of Philip. That is helping some of the momentum that's happening in the individual giving trends this year. The concert series is strong, underway. Ticket sales are phenomenal every time we check in on it. There's already operational changes happening. So what we loved is we started coming in January and asking questions. And then by the time we were synthesizing and putting things together in March, it would say, oh yeah, we tried that differently yesterday. What about this? What about that? So it's almost been this really live process of seeing and doing a quick, almost like proof of concept testing that has then helped the recommendations to get to the point where they are, because the staff was right in this with us. They did not sit on their hands and say, we're just gonna wait for 6 months and get this and then think about it. Everyone was reacting in every single conversation that we had. All the TYA, the field trips, the preschool partnerships, the community outreach, that is growing. There's growth in relationship focused giving as well. But here's the interesting thing. We're recommending that you don't say fiscal year 26 is now where the bar is, and we need to set above that. We need to know and understand that this has a lot of special things that were happening within this. This is a year to try to strive to remember, to grow and learn from, but this is not a standard setting year, and really be conservative is some of the recommendations that we've given back there, because there's so much that's happening as it goes through that. So overall, everything is fundamentally strong. There are opportunities for growth and change. We didn't find a lot of critical weaknesses. I've had to do studies like this before where these conversations are very hard because we come back and say, ooh, this is being mismanaged. This is not happening this way. That's not what you have here at the Arvada Center. You have a very talented and focused staff and organization who has come together to really make something phenomenal for this community. And they're really truly being stewards of every single dollar that they spend, every decision that they're making. And that comes through very clearly in conversations. If Philip's not in the room, they are saying the same thing that they would say when he's in the room. We see consistency, we see success, and everybody's in for that, which is really important. And I think how those dollars are impacting community then is very strong. So what we did is we then looked at the immediate actions, what is tied into some resource and some budgeting analysis, knowing that you can't make change overnight without time and resources, and then talked about some long range actions. So near term, it is important as we're looking at how the space is being used, what's happening, and where to find more space for programming and for educational programs. Coordinating the Haynes cabin removal is very important. That's then going to allow everyone to look at this pilot ballroom programming. So using one of those conference rooms to be able to start doing that in a different way. Then there's a little bit that comes down. This gets a little in the weeds with the organization, but there's some pricing structure that needs to be benchmarked consistently. Our recommendation is keep an eye on what the peers are doing. Dynamic ticketing came into the market 25 years ago, and we learned from Broadway. Now we're learning from what other communities are doing. What are Parks and Rec departments doing? What are arts and culture centers doing? How do we get that set? And really making sure that continues so that pricing can continuously have little tweaks and changes. How people want premium experience comes into this, how they're willing to buy to get something. So that's a little bit of that strategy there. The high demand classes, if we can get more space for them, we can add more. And then really thinking about segmenting the mid-level donor pipeline. There's a chart in the report that shows there's a lot of grassroots being done. There's a lot of opportunity on the other side of the chart, but it's about that giving ladder and how you really can take the mid-level and hopefully grow them into more giving. That is something that can happen pretty quickly. There is a compensation benchmarking study that we have recommended within this. There's a lot of different spaces and how you can actually achieve that, but making sure that the retention piece can be solved for that gap. A lot of the conversations we had came down to dollars in the market. People are competing for good labor. What you don't want to do is train phenomenal staff and then have them leave because they can get a better paycheck somewhere else. So thinking about that career ladder and going through and matching that out, sometimes they just have to have the answer of, hey, yes, we know and understand, but this is what your peers are making here. Sometimes answering that question works. Other times it's an adjustment in budget. It's a little bit of a different strategy that comes through there. And then there's a need for some venue management software. This was a piece of the answer of making sure there's more efficiency, making sure the time spent is spent better. There's some systems that can come in that need to be evolved with that. So high level, and we've touched on some of this, but the organizational infrastructure, the compensation study, a structured onboarding, mentorship, and retention policies. These are easy things that can happen. And then evaluation of the venue management software. That software may not happen overnight. What we've recommended is research it, see what the options are, figure out where it works into budget, and then figure out how to implement it so that it's not a big change overnight. But those are some small changes that can really have some pretty significant impacts. looking at the underutilized assets. This is going to help serve community more. This is going to help drive dollars. This is going to help drive impact, so the reason to give can improve again. So touching on the log cabin and the history museum, making that transition and change. As you saw in the report, there's a great opportunity without major capital impact to start moving around and adding more rooms if this can be out of the space. It's sort of just stuck there now with programming not being able to happen around it, right? So you see the kids getting in there and they're trying to do programming next to it. So it's really a little bit of a backlog there that could be fixed. And then start thinking about a multi-year phase strategy for activation in the ballrooms. This is about measured growth. Test it out, see what can be possible, see who your partners are in the community, what's the gap programming, how do you bring in new audiences, test it, see what it is. Don't overwhelm staff immediately in the first year of saying, we're going to do 40 nights in the new performance space. There's no way, right? Time and resources and labor is going to be really important with delivery of that. And looking at what the activation strategy is, putting a brand together, getting people excited about what that is, and figuring out how to budget within that. Strengthening the contributed revenue capacity. This touches in really in donor progression infrastructure. So there are some pieces, you've got staff, the staff are ready to dig in and to continue having the conversations, how they're tracking it, what you're looking at to find out the wealth profile of an individual. All of that really needs to be figured out to answer some key questions. There's also a little bit of expansion and change of the board representation that needs to happen. And really what this is an evolution of the board over time. This is the board who, for many of them, helped with the transition from being a city-run facility to having the nonprofit. Now, as the nonprofit is growing and changing and there's new priorities, what are the roles? What are the rules and relationships? We've made a recommendation that when the new director starts, that Noelle could actually sit down and learn about her board members by seeing where are their different competencies and then starting to think about where the gaps are, so that not immediately overnight changes can happen, but as you have succession planning, as someone is leaving, you can say, oh, we really need this opportunity to find someone with this core competency. How do we make that happen? Or we have someone who's leaving and we absolutely need that competency. How do we make sure to maintain that? How are you looking at committees, bringing more people up, just not sitting there and saying, our board's always going to be there, thinking about the succession and the next generation and the legacy that that board is leaving behind and how that board is really serving on behalf of the community. Then the last piece of this is really near-term expectations for corporate giving. And I think the expectation setting piece is really important here across everything. The board and leadership really need to be clear and to understand this giving program is not going to change overnight. You are bringing in new leadership. The new leadership may be bringing in new relationships, but that's going to take time to explain, this is where she is now. This is the value of that. How do you make that happen? Same thing with the corporate giving program. This is not an incredibly easy corporate landscape to be asking for dollars in. There's a lot of different changes. There's a lot of hands open right now. You've got a great new talent that's there in that position, but that could be 18 months before you're starting to see things. Thinking about where giving is happening in corporate structures. Sometimes you're starting to talk to them and they're saying you can't apply for another year and then the funds don't come for another year after that. Really setting those expectations clearly. And then really excited about long-term financial resilience and how much the team really wanted this. They were excited to say, how can we make changes that help us be more sustainable to stand alone? And this is, I think, really important when you have city-owned infrastructure. Many times it's easy to say, oh, whatever, the city is always going to pay for that. Everyone's very clear that that is not the case, and that the more successful they are, the more they're of value to this community. So there is the need to protect and grow the education programs earned revenue. That is a workhorse as much as the main stage is a workhorse. So they need to sort of focus on that. Finding more space helps within that. There's a continuing of rebalancing the main stage programming mix. This really comes down to title selection, what's happening with the presenting series, how that all goes out and balances out, what's happening with ticket sales, with marketing, all that comes in. Again, it's going in the right progression, continuously moving that and not getting comfortable that the tickets are always going to sell, right? Always making sure that there's new ideas, new innovation, new artistic strategy that comes down with that. We are recommending that there's a formal fundraising capacity study done. Nobody really knows how much is possible because the data is not there. I'm a big fan of if you can show me the data and you can show me the path to get to where I need to, then we can be strategic about that and go find those resources and go find those relationships. If I don't know, what am I supposed to do? So a fundraising capacity study really helps to dig in, not just on who's on your current list, but who's in the community that maybe isn't engaged? Who is in the community that has the opportunity to give, that's coming and buying tickets, but really no one knows because they're just that silent wealth that's there. Or they have a family foundation. Or I met someone today who it's her job to advise a family on their philanthropic giving. And I was like, that's fantastic. When can we talk? Right? So you're trying to find all of these people. You can't do it while you're also dealing with the ongoing fundraising. So there are many firms that are fantastic at doing this work who can come in and really look at the landscape of Metro Denver and say, here's what your giving profile is, here's who your top targets are, and really help to develop that in a great way. And then continue building towards a strong financial reserve. It's already in a target, it's already a goal, but continuing down that path is going to be really important. So you're in a phenomenal spot. And I'm not just saying that because I love spending time with everyone at the Arvada Center. You all paid us to come in and have an independent look on this. And we did our due diligence. We dug into this. We found little bits and bobs, as you see through the report. But what we were most struck by is the passion of the staff, the current success that's there, and the desire and almost the need to continuously improve. And that for us was a phenomenal space to be in, to say, okay, then let's help find ways to continue this forward so that this is about the next 50 years of the Arvada Center and not about fixing something that's broken. So that was the overall thought that we had. And Philip and Ken, if there's anything that I missed or went too fast on, please feel free to jump in. But I know we want to make sure we can answer as many questions as you all have for us in the time left.
All right.
No, I think
But the only thing I would add, and this is on behalf of the board, a number of board members came up to me after the presentation that we had at our board meeting and felt really, really positive about what you just heard and about the report itself. One of our board members who was on the original board with me leaned over at one point and said, this is what we've been talking about. This is validating what we've been recommending for the last 10 years. So as you saw, some of the stuff in here is going to cost a little bit of money. So our new CEO is going to make the decisions about what comes first and what comes second and what can be afforded this year versus next year. But I can't tell you that there's anything in here that we even took a small issue with. So I'll add my thanks to Philip's thanks to, I know Don, if you didn't come up with the idea, you certainly promoted it pretty strongly last spring when we were talking about this. So this is one of the best things that has come out of this process with you all for the last year.
That's great. All right, I'll open it to the council for any questions. Shauna.
Sharon, you go ahead. I know.
The only concern what I've had is, we really need to make sure that the Historical Society is involved in getting that cabin made because the Historical Society owns the cabin and all the appurtenances. And so they're hearing some second and third hand information that the Arvada Center wants to move it and they're not being involved now. Rebecca and I sit on the board and Rebecca is a member and she's been very active. We will be taking this to the board so that we can get something together to help expedite. But once again, Don, wonderful. He suggested that we get a group of stakeholders together as kind of a project board to get that moved and to find a site to move it to where we can put it up and it's going to be well maintained. So that conversation really got sparked today. I don't know if you know that, but yeah, it got sparked today because some information that Ms. Miller heard. And so Karen Miller, she, so anyway, I just wanted to put that bug in your ear. Thank you.
Shauna.
Yeah. Is a capital feasibility study the same thing as the fundraising capacity study?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yep. So
Because-
it's sorry, go ahead.
My question is, 2 years ago, I know Arvada Center was looking at a capital campaign, but I don't know if you all got far enough along to conduct the feasibility study part of it
No, we
yet.
didn't, and we
Oh.
decided we were not in a position post-pandemic to start a
Okay.
capital campaign, that we weren't strong enough.
Okay, that was my question is like, I remember that, so we should have that if you were able to go through, but you didn't, then yeah.
So I think
okay.
what this looks at is that was a big project involving both the sculpture field and the full-on renovation of the ballrooms and history museum. I think that clearly wasn't doable in the climate that we
Yeah.
were in 2, 3, 4 years
Post-pandemic.
after the pandemic.
Yeah.
So what's great about this study is it recommends chipping away at that, you know.
Okay.
There's stuff we can do in the ballroom now with very low capital investment. There's things we can do in the history museum with very little capital investment. But of course, the real potential is in a full renovation at some point in the future.
Okay, yeah, that was my only question. Wonderful presentation.
Yeah,
Really
thank you.
appreciate how you all came through with this agreement and really glad it was, beneficial. That
No,
it's
yeah.
Working really well for you all, yeah.
And one thing I'll just add in to clarify within that is there are people who will give to capital and there are people who will give to programming.
Okay.
So by doing a capacity study, you can have the consultants, in essence, figure out both paths. It may be that as they're going through the capacity study, they say, you're never going to get a capital campaign done because people are going to say X, Y, and Z. Or they may say, here's this availability for ongoing annual, but there's something really interesting here. If you would ever need to do capital, this is what this is. Capital campaigns take, 5, 10 years sometimes within that. So they'll be able to get both answers so that then for strategic, sort of roadmap planning, they'll know both
So
sides.
that's the difference between a capital feasibility study and what you're recommending.
Yep, kind of puts
Okay.
it together. You can do a comprehensive campaign that is ongoing and capital asks at the same time. You can just focus on ongoing, you can just focus on capital. So our recommendation would be do a comprehensive study so you can answer all of the questions at the same time. You're usually talking to the same group of donors anyway, instead of doing one that's just focused on ongoing and then in 2 years coming back to say, well, what about capital? You can really be more economical and efficient with the dollars being spent and just the time with the donors too, to get the better answers.
Where does the economic impact study fall into that? Would that be something also included when folks come from out of town, that they're spending money for dinner or whatnot, but how does that play in?
Yeah, there's a couple of different things you can do. The American for the Arts has a Prosperity 6 calculator that you can go in and actually just plug in the information online for free now and get your baseline direct and indirect of what's happening today in the county itself with some easy numbers. So we always recommend to folks, just go use that free tool now and have those as those talking points. And then if there's a reason politically within viewpoint that you are all looking at to say, hey, we'd really like to understand what's the larger direct and indirect economic impact of what's going on at the Arvada Center, you could then do a study for that. But we always say to people, don't go get the data unless you're going to do something with it. So, if the city was going to do a larger economic impact study for everything else that's going on, do you include the Arvada Center in that? Do you need a standalone, arts and culture plan that says all of arts and culture in the community is bringing this? Really thinking about why do we want to have this data and what questions do we need to answer to then be able to go do that, because there are, you could do a very simple one or you could do a very complex one, making sure you're spending the right amount of money and time on that to get the right answers.
This was not part of your scope of work, so we didn't discuss this, but we have a board member with expertise in this who's been working with Andy, and Charles. And so there is progress on that. And I think from what I've heard of the description, it's neither the largest study or the smallest study. It's something in between that would involve a methodology of sending out lots of surveys and getting responses. So that is in progress right now, but that board member hasn't yet made a presentation to the board of the full plan.
Perfect. Look forward to learning more.
Yep.
Any additional questions from council? Ken?
Is there time for kind of a final comment?
I think so. We've got about 10 minutes before we need to head downstairs, so.
It's going to take way less than that.
Well, I still need to be able to discuss as well.
Right. You heard a couple of comments that Jenna made about the new CEO and being involved with, learning about the board. And She is already in the process. She starts work officially next Monday, and she'll have 2 weeks of overlap with Philip and then become the CEO July 1. She is already meeting with individual board members and individual staff members, the executive leadership team she's met with. I know that's already in process, but you also heard Jenna say multiple times, data-driven. And this woman is, she's a development professional. That's been her expertise. When Philip was hired, it was a city department. There was no need to be an expert in raising philanthropic support. And to his credit, he steered the staff in that direction. And here's where we are in 10 years. But we recognized this before the study. And our finalists all had a significant amount of background in development work. And what she told me when I got together with her individually a couple of days ago was how she said she is almost to a fault data-driven about everything. And as she has been meeting with staff people, she has said, if you're doing data-driven work right now, I'm really interested in learning how you're doing it and how we can move it forward. If your department has not been doing data-driven work at this point, I'm really looking forward to talking to you about how we can get there. So I think a lot of her focus is kind of tracks with the stuff that we have seen in that report. So I just want to, hopefully that'll give you the level of confidence that the board has in our new CEO.
Oh yeah, Noelle I've met her a couple of times. She strikes me as very impressive. So.
So is that what their
Yeah.
Birthday?
All right.
Good.
Well,
Thank
then,
you all.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.